CM Punk receives a mixed response last night at AEW Collision in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. What will it mean tonight for Forbidden Door? And Jay White picks up a big victory for his team in the main event of Collision. Tetsuya Naito is indeed the tag team partner of Sting and Darby Allin for tonight's Forbidden Door Trios match against Chris Jericho, Minoru Suzuki, and Sammy Guevara. MJF will be defending the AEW World Championship tonight at Forbidden Door against Hiroshi Tanahashi, but it's going to be the opening match of the show. Speaking of MJF, he's going to be making his wrestling in-ring debut on Collision next week. Some more matches have been announced for tonight's Forbidden Door 0-hour show. Christian Cage takes a shot at Cody Rhodes last night on AEW Collision. Miro has a bit of a character change. An update on the viral moment from Anthony Bowen's Rampage segment this past Friday. Saraya makes her return to AEW television last night on Collision. Paul White says he's going to be doing some Captain Insano stuff before he decides to hang up his wrestling boots for good. But speaking of retiring, referee Aubry Edwards says she's going to retire as an undefeated in-ring competitor. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. Let's start off talking about CM Punk and last night's second AEW Collision show on TNT. There was a strong reaction, to say the least, from the Toronto live crowd last night for the AEW Collision main event, including a polarized reaction for the former two-time AEW World Champion CM Punk. While the Toronto fans clearly were excited to see Punk as he made his entrance, as he made his in-ring debut, or in front of them certainly, they were equally electric in both their support and disdain for the Chicago native. With some fans chanting CM Punk throughout his in-ring time, they were often drowned out by boos and general crowd noise. For his part, CM Punk appeared to be quite unbothered, as it seemed he remained having a good time regardless of whether people were cheering him or booing him. In fact, at certain points, he embraces inner Hulk Hogan by cupping his ear and even doing a leg drop at one point, much to the disdain of some people in the crowd in Toronto. Either way, it was an incredibly loud Toronto crowd where no one was bored throughout the main event segment that ran just under 30 minutes. One clearly beloved star in the match was Absolute Ricky Starks, who the crowd was joyfully behind throughout the entirety of his time in the ring. In the final spots of the match, it was Starks who was one-on-one with Jay White, despite White hitting a Uranagi spike on both CM Punk to the crowd cheers, but then immediately one to the still legal Ricky Starks to crowd boos. It would still come down to White and Starks, with Jay White eventually being able to hit the Blade Runner on Ricky Starks and pick up the pinfall victory. Bullet Club Gold and the Gun stood tall to end the second episode of Collision, maybe finally signifying that the Guns and Bullet Club Gold are one, and now Austin and Colton Gunn are members of Bullet Club Gold. But what did you think of the reaction from Toronto to CM Punk? It shouldn't come as much of a surprise, of course, because Kenny Omega, a member of the Elite, is Canadian, so they're taking his side in this ongoing Elite versus CM Punk backstage drama. But what are your thoughts on what went down on AEW Collision last night? Now, it was widely speculated, but now it's confirmed. Tetsuya Naito is the tag team partner for Darby Allin and Sting for tonight's Forbidden Door Trios match. Tetsuya Naito has officially been revealed as Sting and Darby Allin's partner for the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Naito, Sting, and Allin will be facing Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Minoru Suzuki in a trios match tonight in Toronto. While the match will be the first time that Jericho and Sting have met inside the squared circle, Naito and Jericho have a history against one another. In 2018, Jericho defeated Naito to capture the IWGP Intercontinental Championship at New Japan's Dominion event. He held the title until January 2019, where he beat Jericho to win the title back from Chris Jericho at Wrestle Kingdom 13. Before losing the title to Jericho in 2018, Naito beat Suzuki to pick up the IWGP Intercontinental Championship, so there's a lot of stories involved here. Naito was actually absent from the inaugural Forbidden Door, something that New Japan later addressed by saying that he wasn't invited. Naito had additionally noted that he was genuinely upset about it, but he's going to be at the second event tonight, teaming up with Sting and Darby Allin. Now, we do know also the opening match for Forbidden Door. On last night's episode of AEW Collision, the opening match for tonight's pay-per-view Forbidden Door was revealed. After Hiroshi Tanahashi took on Swerve Strickland in a match that the New Japan star eventually won, despite being, it must be said, visibly banged up. Tanahashi clearly struggling with issues with his knees, at one point falling off the top rope and just generally struggling to move around. AEW World Champion MJF's music hit. However, MJF did not appear in person in front of the Toronto crowd, rather appearing in a pre-taped segment in front of the Scotiabank Arena on the big screen. Telling Tanahashi he wouldn't appear an extra night in Toronto just for him, he also didn't plan on sticking around too long to watch a bunch of indie jabronis, so he spoke to Tony Khan. MJF will be defending his AEW World Championship against Hiroshi Tanahashi, but their match will go on first in the pay-per-view's main show. Earlier on in the Collision, as I mentioned, Tetsuya Naito was announced as to be competing at AEW and New Japan's Forbidden Door pay-per-view 2, but Tanahashi versus MJF will be taking place in the opening bout of the show. What do you make of that decision, and what did you make of Tanahashi's performance last night? Are you concerned about how the match is going to look, given that Tanahashi did look visibly banged up during his match against Swerve Strickland? Speaking of MJF, it's not going to be the first time he appears on AEW Collision. Of course, that was the last night he appeared on the program for the first time, but next week's episode of AEW Collision is set to be a big one and will feature MJF's wrestling debut on the show, as well as a handful of matches in the Owen Hart Foundation Cup tournament. As confirmed during last night's episode of AEW Collision, MJF will appear next week to wrestle. The reigning AEW World Champion usually doesn't show up on other shows, but after a brief appearance on Rampage this week, MJF will make his in-ring debut on Collision, where he'll face as of yet an unannounced opponent. Elsewhere in the night, other matches planned for the July 1st episode of Collision include 3 of the first round matches in the men's Owen Hart Foundation Cup tournament. The matches will see Samoa Joe face off against Roderick Strong, Juice Robinson, and Ricky Starks go head-to-head, and Dustin Rhodes going up against Powerhouse Hobbs as well. So plenty of Owen Hart Foundation Cup tournaments taking place next week too. Forbidden Door is live tonight. Of course, we are going to be doing a watch-along and post-show for it here on the channel live, so be sure to join us. But some big matches were confirmed for the Forbidden Door 0-hour show ahead of the big show tonight on pay-per-view. On last night's episode of Collision, the lineup was announced for the 0-hour, a free show airing on AEW's YouTube and social media pages ahead of the big pay-per-view itself. The card for the 0-hour of AEW and New Japan Forbidden Door show ahead of the pay-per-view is now as follows: Athena versus Billy Starks in an Owen Hart Foundation tournament match. Stu Grayson versus El Fantasmo. Mogul Embassy, which is Swerve Strickland, Bishop Korn, and Toa Leona, versus Chaos, which is Rocky Romero, Trent, and El Desperado. United Empire, which is Jeff Cobb, Kyle Fletcher, and TJP, versus Los Ingobernables de Japan, that being Hiromu Takahashi, Shingo Takagi, and Bushi. Those matches will all be taking place on the Forbidden Door 0-hour, which of course will be live for as well as part of the overall live stream watch along this evening, so be sure to join us. Christian Cage, he's not the TNT champion, although if you watched AEW Collision last night, you would think he is, and he also took a shot at current WWE star Cody Rhodes. On AEW Collision, Christian Cage had an in-ring segment in front of his hometown Toronto crowd, and while they started out cheering, they would eventually boo him. However, in the process of the promo touting Luchasaurus' success at winning the TNT title last week on the debut episode of Collision, Cage landed a couple of very intriguing shots. Ribbing on the recent reports that a top AEW star had left Dynamite in a bad mood, Christian Cage would claim that he left Dynamite in a bad mood, and it only got worse when he had to go to Toronto. Later in the segment, while referencing a finite cancellation of any open challenge concept for the TNT Championship, he took a shot at Cody Rhodes as well, noting that he wanted the championship to soar to new heights. He said, quote, "I'm not going to sit here and act like I created this championship. This isn't going to be a vanity project like another guy who used to ride the roads here in AEW, all while still wearing his dastardly turtleneck at the height of heel heat," because that's what Christian Cage does. Despite him not actually being the TNT champion, he's still claiming that he basically is. What did you think of the segment, and what did you think of his shots at Cody Rhodes and the recent reports of people leaving shows in a bad mood because CM Punk was back in the company? Miro is undergoing a bit of a character change now that he's back on AEW television. On last night's AEW Collision, a vignette aired featuring Miro, where he revealed that he was making a big character change. In the return of Miro, he announced that he was summoned back. However, things have changed for him. The Redeemer revealed how now he has renounced his god, his gold, and his beautiful wife in a clip that aired. So, is this going to be a different version of the Redeemer? Certainly looks like it. What he has in store next on AEW television, we'll have to wait and see. Now, something that got a lot of attention this week was the segment involving QTV and the Acclaimed on AEW Rampage. Now, the Acclaimed are probably used to being viral sensations by now, given that scissoring has taken the world by storm. But after their quick victory on this week's AEW Rampage, the trio has gone viral again, this time for an interaction between Anthony Bowens and QTV's Harley Cameron. Now, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select has revealed some details about the segment, which is being lauded as positive and progressive. The moment in question question began when Cameron attempted to musically collaborate with the multi-talented team of Bowen's Platinum Max Caster and Billy Gunn by sharing a rap of her own. When she attempted to come on to the five-tool player, he reminded her that not only is he happily taken, but he's also gay. This prompted the Chicago crowd to proudly chant, "He is gay," to QT Marshall's protege. The moment received acclaim, pun intended, online, as it shows the progress that the world of wrestling has made in the last few decades, particularly as it occurred in June, also known as Pride Month. According to Fightful's report, Gunn and Marshall were largely responsible for putting the segment together. At one point, it was scheduled for Dynamite since the Acclaimed announced they would be on the show, but in the end it was moved to Rampage so it could have an adequate amount of television time. Before it had been slotted for either show, Marshall checked in with Bowens to see if he was comfortable with proclaiming his homosexuality on live television. Bowens was all for it, and the rest was history. Literally, very rarely, if ever, has an open homosexuality, certainly an openly gay person, been portrayed in an inclusive and positive light on a nationally televised wrestling broadcast. So certainly a really big moment for professional wrestling, and a really great reaction to see in the arena there this past week. Saraya is back on AEW television too. On Saturday's AEW Collision, Saraya made her return as part of a run-in alongside AEW Women's World Champion Toni Storm and Ruby Soho. The Outcast came out to the ring after the New Japan Strong Women's Champion Willow Nightingale defeated Nyla Rose to advance in the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Nightingale, who will be facing Storm tonight at Forbidden Door, found herself surrounded by the Outcast before Sky Blue came out with a chair to even the odds. Blue became the first woman to advance in this year's tournament after defeating Anna Jay on AEW Rampage on Friday. Saraya has been absent from AEW programming since the May 31st episode of Dynamite, where she teamed up with Chris Jericho against Adam Cole and Britt Baker. It had been previously reported that Saraya was absent for undisclosed reasons, but we recently learned that she would be returning imminently. She was even present backstage at the June 21st Dynamite this past week. With Nightingale advancing in the Owen Hart Foundation tournament, she will go on to face the winner of the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion Athena versus Billy Starks, which will take place tonight on the Forbidden Door 0 Hour show. Now, let's talk a little bit about Paul White, or should we call him Captain Insano? Well, apparently that's what he's going to be throughout the remainder of his wrestling career. After a fan asked current AEW star Paul White on Twitter if he was ever going to write a book about being in the pro wrestling business for nearly 30 years, White answered that he would, but until he retired. The former WWE superstar also added that he wants to still have more fun with his character from the 1998 comedy The Waterboy, Captain Insano. He said, quote, "Probably not, well, at least not until I retire. I'm still writing chapters in my life, going to have fun with Captain Insano before I hang up the boots for good, but thank you for the inquiry." Now, it's worth remembering that Bobby Butcher's the main character in The Waterboy, played by Adam Sandler's favorite wrestler, made his first cameo on All Elite Wrestling last year. He was part of the Acclaim's music video A Hand for a Hand, and the music video premiered on the November 16 edition of AEW Dynamite. White himself has not been in the ring since the April 4th, 2022 edition of AEW Dark Elevation, where he defeated Austin Green in a little over 2 minutes. He also did commentary for Dark Elevation. White signed with AEW in February of 2021. One of his first matches with the company was a win over QT Marshall at AEW All Out on September 5th, 2021. Since joining the promotion, though, he's dealt with quite a few setbacks. Earlier this year, he had knee surgery and he had to spend 11 weeks in a wheelchair, as revealed in an interview with the Metro earlier this year. Also in that interview, he did confirm that it was a brand new titanium joint and it's good for 35 years. Before that, he had been dealing with hip issues. He's undergone a couple of hip replacement surgeries, so it would still appear that he's still recovering from all of those surgeries. So the question is, do you even want to see Paul White bring Captain Insano to an AEW screen soon? Do you even want to see Paul White back in the ring? Or do you think he should already hang up the boots for good? Finally, Aubry Edwards, she's back to just refereeing now. Fans of Aubry Edwards' in-ring debut from the June 16 episode of Rampage will be disappointed to know that it was both her first and last match as a professional wrestler. The beloved AEW referee won her match by defeating Jeff Jarrett, Karen Jarrett, and Jay Lethal alongside Mark Briscoe and Papa Briscoe in trios action to kick off her short-lived wrestling career, making her undefeated inside of a wrestling ring. Despite this accolade, Aubry has no intention to start a winning streak, instead opting to quit while she's ahead. Quote, "I'm retiring undefeated," Edwards said on a recent episode of the Battleground podcast with Battle and Eli. "I never want to do that again." Before arriving at this conclusion, Edwards talked about how the match came to be, explaining how she needed to pay off the ongoing relationship or conflict she had grown with the Jarretts. Quote, it's really important to have storytelling and long-term payoff, she explained. If the heels don't get their comeuppance and the babyfaces don't end up on top at the end, then you're really upsetting your fans. When the guitar shot happened, that's when we started asking, what's the next logical step for this? Edwards also expressed that while she's been in the wrestling business for multiple years, she was physically unprepared to compete in a proper wrestling match. 22 years of ballet didn't teach me to do a headlock takeover. Those don't translate, she said. It was cool. I'm glad it's over. I wasn't able to walk for 2 days without pain. Well, Edwards got the deciding fall over Karen Jarrett on June 16. Mark Briscoe further humbled the Jay Lethal-led group when he defeated Jeff Jarrett in a concession stand brawl earlier this week on AEW Dynamite. So there you go, guys. It's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.